there are a lot of good Christian men and women, ministers, evangelists, who really truly want to help people who are escaping the cults. So their heart is in the right place. But as you know, it's very complicated to understand a cult. What's even far more complicated to understand the mindset of somebody who has been indoctrinated in a cult, because each individual is unique. There are no two stories that are exactly the same. One of the problems that I've noticed, and this is my opinion. I'm no minister, pastor, evangelist. I never want to be. But what I have seen, when people who are on the outside looking in and they see a cult member and they want to help them, the only thing that they can equate what has happened to them is in their understanding of Christianity versus atheism. So whenever they see a person who is escaping a cult, their first reaction is, oh my gosh, they're escaping the cult. Let's not let them become atheists. So therefore, let them hold on to these core, what they consider to be the core values of Christianity, but what they don't understand, the indoctrination has replaced what they believe to be the core with a different core. And so we were joking before the podcast, and this somewhat relates, but for me, it's as if we were given Stephen King's book, It, and somebody replaced the word Pennywise with Jesus all through the book. It's no different in a cult, because they have given a different personality to God. They've given a different story to Christianity. They've given us a different set of values, morals. Everything about the religion is different. And ironically, it actually matches Pennywise in many ways, if you think about it. But because they have replaced these different attributes and just give it a stamp called Jesus, people try to cling to whatever it is that they believe was Jesus, and it's not. It's a different God entirely. And so I know I'll get hate mail for saying this, but in my opinion, you really have to take yourself all the way down to the bottom layer. You have to literally become an atheist if you want to be fully free from a cult, because you have to wipe your slate entirely clean and then start over and build from the ground up. What is the core values of Christianity? What do Christians believe? I tried to fight that process for years, and literally it drove me mad because I was clinging to that last little thing. This all can't be false, is what was going through my head. I was trying to cling to it, and I realized at the end, everything that I build on a false foundation will also be false. There is no way it can be true. So I just started from square one. Who is Jesus?
Yeah.
What is Jesus? What do Christians believe? In fact, I took this mindset. Pretend I was born in a different country to a different set of parents who had never heard the name Jesus. Would I still believe it? So then I started going through the core values like this, and I started building the personality of who I am. And there's an urgency that the cult teaches, and that's why even in the mainstream churches, they teach that same urgency in many cases. That's why people want to cling to it, because there's this urgency. Oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. The world is going to end.
Yeah.
But I'm in no hurry, man. If it takes me the whole rest of my life to rebuild my foundation, in my stack of foundation, I'm probably right here. I'm just building it back up, and I'm in no hurry.
I'm right with you, where you really do have to cut down to the core, whatever that core is, before you start building back up. Like for me, I remember there was a moment a long time ago where I was talking to a good friend of mine who was very worried that I would become an atheist or become a Buddhist or not a Christian, lose my faith entirely, which to some extent is true. But when I was sort of in that deconstruction place, I remember going through and recognizing exactly what you were saying of like, okay, well, I don't really know who God is, because the people who use God's name and taught me about the nature of God were clearly like, I'm not interested, first of all, in worshiping that God anymore, because I've seen the fruit of that God. So they were using the name of Jesus and using the Bible, but was it actually that? It was clearly constructed in their own image. Like the God that I was taught was not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was the God of, Bob Jones, Mike Bickle, and Bob Hartley. And it was clearly constructed in those men's image and reflected back very positively on them and not on anyone else. And so there was that moment where I remember having to be like, I got to break it all down. And basically I got to the point of being like, okay, but I know that like these men don't have a trademark on beauty, truth, and goodness, kindness. And that was sort of my foundation of like, okay, well, there were still a whole lot of things that I experienced throughout my life that I can say was beautiful, was true, and was good. And even though I was terrified because there's that sort of urgency thing of like, if I don't know, if my allegiance isn't to Jesus at the time when I die, then I might go to hell and be tortured for eternity. And I basically was just like, look, if I believe in a God, I want to believe in a God who cares about goodness, truth, and beauty. And if I'm pursuing those things and trying to find my foundation, like if that's my core foundation, if that's my bedrock of do what is kind, what is true, what is just, that I believe that a God is going to like accept and appreciate that, and I don't know if I really want to worship a God who doesn't accept those things. And so finding that as like my core, like character foundation and then being able to build back up, I think for me, that's the way it had to be with me. Like I had to cut everything in my life. All of my religious understanding, all of my understanding of who God was, I had to cut down to the core. I don't know if every single individual has to do that to get extricated from this sort of cult communities, but for people who grew up in it, I think that's often the case because you kind of have to just start at square one.
And interestingly, I had this conversation not long ago with another guy. When you're in these destructive Christian cults, they teach you incorrectly what the other people that aren't cult members are. And so in our minds, we actually categorized the agnostics with the atheists. You either believe or you don't. It's on or it's off. And there's no variations in between. Well, whenever you leave the cult and you start deconstructing, you're actually becoming agnostic. You're not becoming atheist.
Yeah.
But I even used the word atheist previously because that's what we were taught. That's how we were indoctrinated.
Right.
But you're no different than the believers who were in Berea. They were agnostics, right? They sought it out for themselves. They studied it and they found it to be true. They said it may be true, it may not. And so we examined it and we found what we believed. Well, that's what a person who leaves a cult has to do. You have to get to that point. And there comes a point where I use the word atheist when I talk about deconstruction because you're deconstructing a false god and you're becoming an atheist to that false god. And in my opinion, you've never heard the God of the Bible when you're in these cults because they teach you different personalities. This is like you just mentioned, this is a narcissistic God. And if God looks like this, I'm not sure I want to serve that God. You know what I'm saying? So you have to become an atheist to that one. But then you have to understand, well, okay, what is real? And you have to start from square one. So that's my process. And again, it's my opinion. There are many other people who disagree with that. But I think, for me, I don't think there was another way.
Yeah. And I think that part of the problem, too, is that I'm not saying I'm right in my process. I'm not saying you're right in your process either. I definitely resonate with what you're saying, though. I think what's really difficult is there isn't a whole lot of freedom for like the conversation that I am having with you right now would not be a conversation that I could have with about 90% of the people that I grew up with, because it's just too scary. Whether agnostic, atheist, they don't care. backslidden believer, even if I just became a universalist Christian, having certainty in these few certain things was a requirement for even just conversation and relationship. And to even get to the place where it's like, okay, you are going to hold true with these certain things, but is it okay if I don't hold true to those things? Like if I don't have that conviction anymore, I have to deconstruct. I have to take all of these things out. And my deconstruction is somehow threatening to other individuals' way of living. And I think that's just really, really sad and makes these communities just so terribly insular and isolating, where if you step out, if you deconstruct from a few of these core beliefs, you're suddenly isolated from the community. I had a very important figure in my life who was a lifelong friend with my father and my family. When I spoke up about my dad just 6-8 months ago, and it was very intense, because I was really, the reason I was having to come forward about my dad was some pretty intense reasons that I haven't fully gotten into on this podcast. But it was just a very intense situation where I was trying to warn people that, like, hey, he not only was my father like using prophecy, but he was doing it abusively and was taking advantage of people. And even presently, it was a present situation. And so I was kind of sounding the alarm about it. And I had this lifelong family friend who started speaking very ill of me, that it was backslidden was the term that he was telling individuals. And he never confronted me about it. And he had never spoken to me about what my, faith was, about the questions that I had. And it felt like a real betrayal, because I was really trying to do something for the benefit of the community that I grew up in. Like, I wasn't sounding the alarm about my dad so that I could tell the, atheists and the liberals reasons why to hate the Christian community that I grew up in, or anything like that. To some extent, I do think that there's conversations that need to be had that is universal and not just to the sort of Pentecostal world. But I was really trying to speak up because I was worried about the impact that it was continuing to have on the Pentecostal community and the loved ones, the people at Bethel and IHOP that I knew and cared about, and wanted to see, people not continue to be deceived and taken advantage of. And to then have someone who was a close family friend, like, speak out against me and my identity was really hard. And it makes sense why people do it, but it's a really sad state of the world that I grew up in, and that you grew up in, I'm sure too.